Every day we are bombarded with news of crisis, economic instability, mounting debt, and an uncertain future. Many people work harder than ever, but remain trapped in a sense of insecurity, as if prosperity were always out of reach. And the question that arises even silently is profound and unsettling. Who do we really trust when it comes to money? It is precisely in this context that Psalm 91 becomes more relevant than ever. This psalm speaks not only of spiritual protection, but also reveals a shift in mindset. It invites us to move away from fear and scarcity and into a position of trust, rest, and wisdom. A mindset that directly impacts how we manage our personal finances, our businesses, our professional decisions, and even our dreams. Perhaps you're experiencing a period of financial uncertainty. Maybe you're trying to start a business, organize your finances, or simply seek stability, but feel like something always slips out of control. This video isn't about magic formulas or empty promises of quick riches. It's about aligning your mind, your heart, and your actions with timeless principles that have transcended generations and continue to transform lives today. If this message already resonates with you, stay until the end of the video because I'm going to tell you about true success from a biblical perspective. And subscribe to the channel and leave a like, as this greatly helps the channel. When we talk about renewing our financial mindset, it's impossible not to confront the great silent enemy of our time, fear. A fear that doesn't only appear when money is scarce, but manifests itself even when there is income, work, and opportunities. It's the fear of losing, of not being enough, of not being able to support the family, of failing in business, of growing old without security. This fear accompanies many people from the moment they wake up until the moment they go to sleep, shaping decisions, choices, and even dreams. We live in an extremely informed, yet emotionally overwhelmed generation. Never before has there been so much talk about investments, entrepreneurship, extra income, and financial freedom, and yet never before has there been so much anxiety related to money. This happens because most of the time, the basis for these decisions is not peace, but urgency. Not confidence, but pressure. People don't make decisions driven by purpose, but by panic. And when fear becomes the main advisor, financial choices tend to be impulsive, unbalanced, and often destructive. Financial fear also creates a survival mentality. This is when a person starts living only to pay bills, put out fires, and avoid immediate losses without being able to see the future clearly. In this state, money ceases to be a tool and becomes a tyrant. It controls emotions, relationships, and even spirituality. Many pray for provision, but deep down they trust their bank balance more than God. Others work excessively, sacrificing their health and family, believing that only human effort can guarantee security. It is precisely at this point that Psalm 91 directly confronts the mentality of our time. While the world says that security comes from accumulation, absolute control, and predictability, the Word presents a completely different principle. The psalm begins by speaking of dwelling in the shelter of the Most High, resting in the shadow of the Almighty. This is not a metaphor distant from financial reality. On the contrary, it is a powerful declaration against the fear that dominates the modern mind. Dwelling and resting indicate constancy, permanence, and trust. These are not the attitudes of someone who lives in constant alert, but of someone who has found a safe place. Financial fear thrives where there is no inner peace. It feeds on the feeling that everything depends exclusively on us. When this idea takes hold, any instability becomes a gigantic threat. An unforeseen event, a drop in income, an opportunity that didn't work out, everything starts to be seen as the end. But Psalm 91 reminds us that there is a protection that doesn't depend on external circumstances. A protection that acts even in scenarios of crisis, scarcity, and uncertainty. This doesn't mean ignoring reality or acting irresponsibly. On the contrary, when fear is replaced by trust in God, the mind becomes clearer, decisions wiser, and planning more balanced. A person stops reacting to chaos and begins to act with discernment. They understand that crises are part of the journey, but they don't define the destination. That risks exist, but they don't need to be faced with despair. That money is important, but it doesn't take the place of God. When fear begins to lose its power, the most important question of the entire financial and spiritual journey arises. Where, in fact, do we live? Not physically, but mentally and spiritually. Because Psalm 91 doesn't begin by talking about deliverance, prosperity, or victory. It begins by talking about position. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. To dwell is not to visit, not to resort only in times of crisis, not to remember God when everything seems out of control. To dwell is to remain, is to make that place the center of life, of decisions, and of the way one sees the world. This word is fundamental to understanding the basis of a healthy financial mindset. Many people want the results of faith, but they don't build a life rooted in it. They want the peace that comes from trusting in God, but they continue to feed their minds with anxiety, comparison, and fear. They want to prosper, but they make decisions guided by environmental pressure and not by spiritual direction. The hiding place of the Most High represents the exact opposite of this logic. It symbolizes a place of intimacy, alignment, and inner rest where the mind stops operating in survival mode and begins to function with clarity and purpose. Living in this safe haven completely changes how we view money. Money ceases to be the source of security and becomes merely a resource under management. When this reversal occurs, something profound transforms within us. Anxiety decreases, the urge to rush loses its power, and the need to prove something to others begins to disappear. The person begins to understand that their value lies not in how much they possess, but in whom they trust. And this change in mindset is the foundation of any sustainable financial growth. In the context of personal and business finances, this manifests itself in a very practical way. Those who dwell in the shelter of the Most High do not make financial decisions simply because everyone else is doing it. They are not swayed by easy promises, quick gains, or dubious shortcuts. There is a greater sensitivity to perceive when something seems too good to be true. There is discernment to say no to opportunities that would bring profit but would cost peace, integrity, or values. This type of person understands that not all money is worth the price it demands. Furthermore, dwelling in this place of trust generates mental rest. And rest is not passivity, it is balance. A rested mind thinks better, plans better, and reacts better to difficulties. While fear generates impulsive decisions, rest generates consistent strategies. While anxiety leads to overwork without direction, trust produces constancy and focus. This is why many people work hard but do not prosper. They are always agitated, always rushing, always trying to compensate for something that is lacking internally. Dwelling in the shelter of the Most High also redefines the concept of success. Success ceases to be merely about accumulating and becomes about sustaining. Sustaining peace, family, faith, values, and purpose. How many people achieve significant financial gains but live emotionally exhausted, spiritually empty, and constantly worried? This happens because they built prosperity outside of the shelter, outside of His presence, outside of rest. Psalm 91 teaches us that prospering without dwelling in that place is like building on sand. The psalm speaks of deliverance from the snare of the fowler, of plagues that walk in darkness, of visible and invisible dangers. This language reveals something profound. Not all risk is obvious. Many of the greatest financial losses do not come from predicted crises, but from decisions made without discernment, from wrong associations, from opportunities that seemed safe but hid traps. How many people have lost everything not because of a lack of effort, but because of a lack of direction? How many businesses have collapsed not for lack of talent, but for lack of spiritual protection? If this message is speaking to you and bringing clarity to your financial and spiritual life, leave your like now. This greatly helps the channel reach more people. And take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content that combines biblical principles, practical wisdom, and personal and financial growth. Divine protection, in this context, doesn't mean that nothing will go wrong, but that not everything that could go wrong will be allowed to destroy us. There's a huge difference between facing losses with despair and overcoming challenges with the certainty that there is greater care supporting the process. Those who live this truth begin to make decisions with more balance. They don't embark on financial adventures driven by greed, but neither do they hide for fear of making mistakes. There is courage, but a courage accompanied by prudence. Psalm 91 teaches us that God's protection operates in both the visible and the invisible realms. And this completely changes how we deal with business and money. Often, a door that closes is not failure, it's deliverance. A proposal that doesn't move forward is not a loss, it's protection. A delay may be exactly the time needed to avoid a greater loss. But only those who trust can see this. Those who live in anxiety interpret everything as a threat. Those who live in faith learn to interpret events with discernment. This protection also manifests itself in the ability to say no. In today's financial world, we are constantly pressured to seize the opportunity of the moment, to jump on trends without reflection, to act quickly, so as not to fall behind. But not all haste comes from God. Often, haste is the result of fear of losing something. Those who trust in divine protection understand that what is truly destined does not require despair. There is peace even in difficult decisions. There is clarity even in confusing scenarios. A scarcity mindset is one of the strongest hallmarks of our time. It manifests in the constant feeling that there is never enough. No matter how much one earns, there always seems to be a lack. No matter how hard one works, there's always the fear of losing everything. This mindset creates a life of permanent tension, where the person never enjoys what they have because they're always worried about what they might lack tomorrow. And this continuous anxiety drains energy, steals joy, and compromises the ability to make good decisions. Psalm 91 acts precisely in this invisible field of the mind. It doesn't begin by promising material abundance, but inner security. It speaks of rest, shelter, and confidence. This is fundamental because financial anxiety arises when the mind tries to anticipate all possible scenarios, attempting to control the future. The person begins to live constantly in tomorrow, imagining losses, crises, and failures that haven't even happened yet. The result is an emotionally exhausted life, even when nothing concrete is going wrong. Renewing the mind against scarcity means changing the source of security. As long as security is based solely on numbers, contracts, or external stability, anxiety will always find a reason to exist. But when security becomes grounded in God, the mind begins to experience a new kind of peace. Not a naive peace that ignores reality, but a conscious peace that acknowledges challenges without succumbing to them. This renewal doesn't happen automatically. It requires internal confrontation. It requires identifying old beliefs that have been built up over a lifetime. Phrases like, "Money is always hard to come by," "Those who prosper lose faith," "You can't trust the future," "If I relax, everything will fall apart." Many of these ideas seem normal, but they fuel a scarcity mindset disguised as prudence. Psalm 91 invites us to replace these internal narratives with a deeper truth. God continues to be a provider, even in difficult times. Financial anxiety is also deeply linked to comparison. We live in an environment where we are constantly exposed to the success of others, to the achievements of others, to results that always seem better than our own. This creates a silent pressure to run faster, earn more, prove more. And in this race, the person loses the ability to perceive their own progress. The mind becomes restless, dissatisfied, and impatient. Renewing the mind means learning to step away from this constant comparison and refocus on one's own path, one's own process, on what God is building individually. Psalm 91 reminds us that each person dwells under a specific covering. This means we don't need to live someone else's financial life, nor copy trajectories that aren't our own. When we understand this, anxiety diminishes because we stop measuring our lives by the wrong parameters. We begin to understand that sustainable growth takes time, that financial maturity is a process, and that excessive haste almost always exacts a high price. When the mind is renewed and anxiety loses its control, a fertile ground emerges where three essential principles begin to operate consistently: wisdom, discipline, and constancy. These are not abstract concepts or things far removed from financial reality, but practical tools that sustain prosperity over time. Psalm 91 doesn't directly mention spreadsheets, goals, or strategies, but reveals a spiritual environment where these virtues can flourish without being stifled by fear or haste. Wisdom is the first of these tools. Unlike technical knowledge, biblical wisdom is related to the ability to correctly apply what one knows. Many people understand basic financial principles, but fail in practice because their decisions are influenced by disordered emotions, pride, or comparison. When the mind is aligned with God, wisdom begins to guide choices more clearly. The person learns to discern the right time to act, the moment to wait, and even when retreating is not failure, but strategy. Discipline emerges as the second essential tool. Without discipline, even the best intentions are lost over time. Many people start well in their financial lives, organize themselves for a period, but give up at the first obstacle. Financial discipline requires consistency in simple but powerful habits: controlling expenses, respecting limits, planning before spending, separating needs from wants. These habits, although they may seem small, build a solid foundation that supports long-term growth. Consistency, on the other hand, is the instrument that keeps prosperity alive over time. We live in a culture that values quick results, immediate gains, and instant solutions. However, sustainable prosperity is almost always the result of silent and continuous processes. Consistency teaches us to keep doing what is right, even when the results are not yet visible. It combats frustration, premature giving up, and the feeling that effort without return is a waste of time. Now, I will talk to you about true success from a biblical perspective. Up to this point, we have seen that prosperity is not the result of impulses, shortcuts, or simply human effort. It is born from inner alignment. And it is precisely at this point that the biblical perspective directly confronts the concept of success that the world insists on selling. From a biblical perspective, success is not just about arriving somewhere. Buddha remains standing along the path. It's not just about conquering, but sustaining. It's not just about prospering externally, but living in inner security. Psalm 91 speaks of protection, rest, deliverance, and God's constant presence. This reveals that true success includes peace amidst pressures, balance amidst responsibilities, and purpose amidst achievements. When we apply this to financial life and business, we realize that success isn't about making money at any cost. Success is about growing without losing your values. It's about prospering without compromising your integrity. It's about moving forward without sacrificing everything that truly matters. How many people do we know who have achieved impressive financial goals but live trapped by anxiety, the fear of losing everything, or a feeling of emptiness? This kind of success demands too high a price. Psalm 91 shows us that there is a prosperity that goes hand in hand with emotional and spiritual security. It doesn't promise a life without challenges, but it guarantees a presence that sustains us amidst them. This completely redefines how we view victories and defeats. A period of financial growth is not the only sign of success, just as a difficult phase doesn't mean failure. True success lies in the ability to navigate all seasons without losing one's identity, faith, and purpose. It became clear that renewing your financial mindset doesn't begin with money, but with the heart and mind. When we choose to dwell in the shelter of the Most High, fear loses its power, anxiety finds rest, and decisions are guided by wisdom. Prosperity ceases to be a desperate pursuit and becomes a natural consequence of a life aligned with eternal principles. True success lies not only in what we achieve, but in the peace with which we walk, the integrity with which we build, and the purpose that sustains each choice. May this message lead us to trust more, plan better, and live in balance, knowing that under God's protection it is possible to prosper without losing what truly matters. And if this content resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to continue growing with wisdom and purpose.